Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Algonquin Highlands is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We also acknowledge a historical shared presence of other Indigenous nations throughout the area, and we recognize these original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda today? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved the September 18th, 2025 regular meeting agenda be approved as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of September the 4th? Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved the September 4th, 2025 regular meeting minutes be approved as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. And we have no public meetings today or delegations or presentations. Did anyone wish to have any of the items on the consent agenda pulled? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to adopt the consent agenda? Councillor Shortreed and Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved that items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and enacted in one motion. Each matter of business contained in the consent agenda is recorded separately in the minutes of the meeting, and that Council approves the September 18th, 2025 consent agenda and hereby adopts the staff reports and all recommendations contained therein and directs staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions.
All in favor? That's carried. So next up is building and bylaw enforcement. The first report is the department's monthly activities. Good morning, Mr. Moore.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. The only highlight for this report will be the fact that we received over 19,000 in fees, and we had a construction value in excess of 2.48 million.
And I wonder if you could tell us what BWP stands for.
Building without permit.
Well, thank you.
We should have expanded that. Sorry about that.
Any questions on the monthly report? Hearing none, then could I have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved, Council received building bylaw report BLDG 1125 regarding August monthly activities for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, sir. Next up, exciting discussion coming up. Septic re-inspection program and how we move forward with that. Morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Madam Mayor and members of Council. In accordance with Council's previous direction, staff have prepared program models and costing options for the proposed 2026 discretionary septic re-inspection program. This initiative reflects the Township's ongoing commitment to protecting our lakes and waterways, vital shared assets that contribute to environmental health, public well-being, and long-term sustainability. Drawing on data from the Township's previous program, we've gained meaningful insight into the condition and distribution of on-site sewage systems. This analysis has informed the development of several delivery models, ranging from phased in-house implementation to the appointment of a dedicated full-time inspector. Each approach outlines distinct operational strategies and corresponding cost considerations. These models have been shaped through collaboration with staff across multiple departments. And on behalf of the Chief Building Official and myself, I would like to extend a sincere thanks to all of those who have contributed their expertise to this important work. As part of today's review, we are respectfully seeking Council's direction on 5 key components: the preferred delivery model, inspection scope, inspection frequency, the inclusion of third-party service options, and whether certain system classes should be incorporated into the program at this time. As always, it is our pleasure to support council, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I'm looking for comments from council. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Great report, really clearly laid out. Thank you so much. A question for clarification regarding the dedicated in-house inspector option. A couple of them, I suppose. One would be, if we were to hire a full-time Part 8 inspector, what would he or she do in the 5 or 6 months of the year when access to septics are really, really complicated? Snow.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. That's a great question. Typically, through that portion of the year, we would be doing a lot of administrative work, remedial action as far as the previous year's inspections, preparing for the upcoming inspection year, a lot of administrative work.
Okay. And if I may, although this might be coming at a, yeah, I guess the financial impact is to be determined, but do you have a sense of the cost differential just in general between a dedicated in-house inspector cost over the year versus the other, another model, like a pay-per-use model? Is there any sense of the cost differential to the tax levy between those two, or would that be coming to a future meeting?
We could bring that through you, Madam Mayor, sorry. We could bring that to a future meeting, but our initial calculations show that a dedicated inspector on the levy, I assume is what we're talking
Yeah.
about, as part as an ongoing service to the constituents, would end up being cheaper than the pay per use.
Okay.
As it working out on the figures that we've been working with. Now, of course, figures, it depends on a lot of different variables, how many inspections we're going to complete and how many years it's going to take for the cycle. And as technology evolves and we are able to implement that and maybe streamline things and make it faster, it'll be even cheaper again. Yes, there's a lot of different variables, but the initial calculations are showing that it'd be cheaper.
Thanks.
Other questions? We'll go to
Mhm.
Councillor Richards.
Do you have a sense for how much work this would be for one person? Like, I guess that would depend on the classes that are inspected, the priority levels given. But do you think that one person would be able to carry out the expectation of all of it, given that we contracted it out previously and they had more than one person doing it?
And thank you for that. Through you, Madam Mayor. The person would be supported by staff. So we would have our administrative assistant to building planning would be doing a lot of the mail outs and such. And Jeff and I would be doing a lot of the supporting in the field as well as here at the office. So it's not just one person that's going to do this. The one person will be dedicated to it and will be the forefront. And doing a majority, and especially on access from land, there would be one person, but as soon as we get to do water access, there will be two of us anyway. So.
Councillor Shortreed.
So then you feel that this position is enough workload for someone full-time all year round, or would they be able to supplement building and bylaw when they aren't busy as well?
We haven't explored that yet, because I do believe that it's going to be enough work for one person for all year round. Because the administrative background, just pulling the information around the sewage systems for the next year to, and doing the mail outs and doing the remedial action from the year before, it's going to be a lot of work.
I'm not To be perfectly honest, I'm not convinced yet. I guess maybe I'd need to see a job description that is something that can keep people busy for, or a person busy for a full year. Particularly hearing that you're saying that during, portions of the work, another member of your staff would need to support them. So we're talking more than one person, for part of the year. I'm just not convinced that, I'm guessing like 6 months, even 7 months of the year, maybe we could be doing inspections. Is there really and truly enough work to keep them busy for the rest of the year? And, if there is support coming from you, if there's support coming from the administrative assistant, maybe I need to see a job description to help me with that. Um, Madam CAO?
And the support from other staff members would be mainly during the busy times of the year. So when they're out doing the inspections, that's where the support would come from. In the off-season months, they would take on that administrative role. And there's, keeping in mind that there's a database to build on, and like knowing that, and to Councillor Richard's comment that, WSP had multiple people working on the project, there is enough for one person during the off-season months. And again, and I know I've said this before, but certainly I wouldn't recommend adding a position to the township unless I was convinced that there was enough.
Well, and that therein lies my struggle. Every time we add, another staff member, it's, another percent or more added to the levy. And, I just really have been kind of struggling with that. But going over a couple of other points that you've been making, I guess I would look to see what council's thoughts are on whether or not we need to include the class 1 to 3 in the regular inspections. How important you feel now, if I'm not mistaken, that's outhouses, and the 2 and 3 are?
Gray water systems are class 2s, and class 3s are cesspools, in which there are very few of them in the township.
And how many of those systems do you believe are close, like are on waterfront properties?
Approximately, I would say the majority of those systems, as they typically tend to service cottages based on the previous program data. I would say that, yes, the bulk of those systems would be located on cottage properties, which would primarily be waterfront.
So thoughts from council on whether the class 1 to 3 system should be included, or whether we should fit them into a time slot at some point in time to be looking at them? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
I think that's where science should dictate. It strikes me that an outhouse, and I'm not a scientist, but it strikes me that an outhouse with that unfiltered direct leaching capacity stands the risk of creating more harm than a Rolls-Royce septic system, which would therefore maybe need a much more frequent look-see rather, over the Rolls-Royce system. But I'm not sure. I think for me, the important thing is any system, whichever class, that is posing a higher risk to the environment should be inspected more frequently than the ones that are posing minimal to no risk. And if there was a way of phasing it, so if you've proven that you've got this phenomenal system that is likely not going to explode in the next 20 years, you get a reprieve for the next 6 years on inspection. And the ones that, regardless of class, just don't fit that criteria are inspected on a far more frequent basis. That would suit me.
That strikes me as adding some complications to the program, which kind of leads me to one of the other issues that you've raised, and whether it should be we're only going to be inspecting systems that are 20 years or older, and I'm thinking we kind of came to a pretty firm decision or conclusion when we had our first round with the WSP that we would look at 5 systems that were 5 years or older, and work on a 5-year kind of circular continual program. That it worries me that we would only be looking at systems, when they're 20 years or older, that to me, there's a lot of pitfalls, a lot of areas where things could go wrong, between a 5-year and 20-year term. We've heard stories of systems that have been installed that have gone awry within the first year. So, I'd really like us to land on, here's council's thoughts on the timing of that. Councillor Short-Reed?
So with WSP, we were in a 5-year program. So if we kept it the same, because we've already expected pretty much everyone in that 5-year program, keeping it rolling on a 5-year program would perpetually cover all the septic systems. So we already have something that's working. And
Yeah, I
then
agree.
You're still covering, like picking this and this and this, it's to me gonna be a chaotic mess in a sense. Whereas if we keep what we're doing in the same pattern, I think we'll continually cover the same property
Simplify the
every
system.
5 years.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Yeah, I do hear that. I think the beauty of a database, though, is that it can very quickly be filtered according to risk level. So if someone does an inspection and, ooh, this one is a high risk, I'm going to give it a risk level 1. The next year you filter against risk levels and you pull up all the level 1s. So there are ways for it not to be complicated, presuming the work goes in at the forefront.
Councillor Richards?
I do agree with that. I think that science should indicate where we go with what we prioritize as inspection, keeping it as uncomplicated as possible, but we are in a dynamic situation of varying classes, varying systems, varying uses, and varying concerns depending on locations. So I do think that some scientific backing at the beginning is a good approach to take when we decide what is going to be prioritized. Blanketing it, yes, it covers everything, but it also creates a lot of extra work in looking at systems that don't need to be looked at. Whereas it's more important that we manage the ones that do. So I like that approach, but I don't know that off the go, that's the way we can go. We do have some data already from the previous inspection that we can start with. But from what you've learned going through that, would you say those class 1-3 systems right now for us are that priority? Or should we be dropping them off in this next initial phase and focusing on the other systems?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Perhaps if I may, I do have some data from the past WSP program that we just completed. Their records indicate that the general system age, 10 to 20 years, now this was based on 2022, so we could have a little bit of variation in there. Less than 10 years, 10 to 20 years, I'm sorry, we had approximately 30% of the age of systems across the inspection model for the township. So that would leave and depending upon that marker, as far as time going by, I would say it would leave about 70 to 80% of all systems being over the age of 20 years, as far as that goes. The percentage of classes 1 through 3 in the overall tally for the township was 30%. So
30% that
30% of the entire, sorry, let me clarify that. So through the 1 through 5 classifications, 1, 2s, and 3s represented 30% of the total number of systems that were inspected in the previous program.
that were inspected or not, or I was thinking you were saying that that of the systems that we have in place, 30% of them are class 1 to 3.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
That is correct. Absolutely. Yes. So that would leave 70%. The bulk of those, 63% of those systems rather are class 4 systems. And it leaves about 5% for class 5 systems. So if that may help council at all in those considerations.
Deputy Mayor Dayu?
It does help. I wonder though, within that 30%, how many of them prove to be problematic? I think that my worry is of the dug pits, how many are posing a risk to the water? How many are posing the risk to the, the literal system around it? And how many are absolutely fine? That's the key, because if 3/4 of that 30% have posed risk and needed to be remedied in some way, then I think we should be focusing on them. And if none of them did, then that's a whole different ballgame.
Yes.
If I may, through you, Madam Mayor, is, the bulk of the remedial on class 1s was screening and vents. The pit itself, the construction of a class 1, they're to receive human waste only, no liquid or gray. So it does not prevent or promote a environmental hardship, because it's the gray water for the most part, as you're probably aware. It's the phosphates and such that kill our lakes. It's not the human waste that's in the class 1 pit. It's never has created an issue that I'm aware of, but I'm not a scientist either. But yeah, it's more the gray water and the effluents that are causing the environmental problems. So, but we did have a lot of remedial to deal with on class 1s, but again, it was all small stuff, screening and vents. So
That was my understanding, that with the class 1, it was more screening and venting and as opposed to, fluids,
correct.
So that would suggest that we could possibly remove, now this kind of goes against your concerns, but that we could possibly remove class 1 systems. I'm not sure about the gray water systems, and, what are your thoughts on gray water and the level of concern that they bring?
Yeah, I personally, I do agree to a certain extent, because I just said that the water, the effluent is the problematic area, and that's what gray water pits receive. So I would agree personally.
Would you suggest that, when it comes to class 1 systems, that we should maybe slot them into, I mean, maybe they're the ones that we can look at every 20 years, and look at a different scheduling for the more complicated systems? Because I can't see leaving them out completely. But, given what you're saying, it sounds like the outhouses are less of a risk than 2 or 3 or anything beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. And to maybe assist with that point also is that OBC doesn't require a permit for a class 1. So technically we don't, until we get on site, we don't even know if they have one.
Well, and then I know that there are some properties, when they're starting to develop, they put in an outhouse and then later on put in a septic system, but keep the outhouse.
Correct.
So, I mean, you don't know how often that happens as well. Councillor Councillor Richards.
Wouldn't most properties that have a class 1 outhouse also have a gray water pit because they have a class 1 outhouse?
Through you,
So
Madam
if
Mayor. Yeah, that's right.
if the gray water pit is a concern and you're on the property inspecting anyway,
I agree.
then what's the point in eliminating the class 1?
No, I agree wholly. If we're on the property for a class 2 and the class 1's there, we should look at it.
Okay, so how does that, I'm just trying to see if we say, okay, we want to leave out class 1, but if we find that there's a class 2, we will inspect a class 1. Can we work that into the, is that a simple way of working in the system? I mean, that way we're not actually saying that we're not going to be inspecting class 1s, but just, including in the program that if we see that there is one, then we would inspect it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep it kind of as simple as we can.
And thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it does need to be simple but my recommendation is if council's looking at putting it on the levy and hiring someone, do all the classes.
And which brings me to my next question about what, what do we feel? Should we, well, I guess we need to decide, do we want staff to do this in-house? Do we want to hire an additional person? And B, do we want to have a fee-for-service system, or do we want to put it on the levy? My concern about putting it on, I mean, I can see kind of both sides of it, but I'm sort of thinking, okay, if we having heard the concerns, that people have had, like, what do you mean I've got a $200 bill for an inspection? I mean, that did raise the ire, but, we can also raise the ire of adding a 1.5%, 2% increase to the levy, depending on, how much this ends up costing. And what about when somebody's got a really solid system and there's no problems with it, you go there, it's simple. Another person has got a system that they're not looking after. There's all kinds of problems with it. There's lots of follow-up and they're taking more time. And is that fair for other people to be paying for that on the levy? As opposed to, hey, you've got a problem and it's going to cost you.
True enough, but that would be the case with the user pay anyway, because we're still all paying the same, but got a lot more time involved with you than I do with your neighbor, and we're all paying the same.
Oh, you'd have a lot more time with my neighbor than you would
Right.
with me.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's the same because on the levy, it's a service that we would provide going forward forever. That I think I'm not I don't know the math on what a 1.5% or 1% increase is going to do, but on my own situation, I think it would equate to maybe $3 a year. So it's.
But when people look at, when we're doing our budgeting and people look at the budget and they look at the increases of the budget, some people look at the actual dollar figure, the increase, and other people want to know, okay, what's the percent increase on the levy?
Yeah.
And that sticks in their minds quite a bit. And if we're hiring an additional staffer, as is always the case, if you're talking about, say, an average of, I don't know, let's say $75,000, that's a 1% increase or more on the levy. And that's before we get into everything else that we want to do. We'll go to Angie first and then Councillor Richards. Madam CAO, Angie, sorry.
I guess no matter what council decides to do in these options, there is going to be a cost. Yes, it will be if council chooses user pay, but there is still a cost when it's supported by staff. So it just isn't as quantifiable as a percentage on the increase or on the levy. So there will still be a cost to the township, no matter what you choose.
Excuse me, Councillor Richards.
Yeah, this is the one place where I think it's appropriate to be on the levy. It's something that every property tax owner has to pay, regardless of it being paid as a $200 fee or included in their levy. It's unavoidable. Whereas, a membership at the recreation center is avoidable. This is not. So if we can save them money by having it a part of the levy, not having to bill, not having to collect for it and do all that financial administration on top of it, I think that's the best way for us to go.
Councillor Shortreed, then Deputy Mayor Dayu.
And I agree 100%.
Yeah, I really hadn't thought about the additional financial aspect of it. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
I agree 100% that it should be in-house. That for sure. It's a database that we should have control over, adjust as we want to, be able to refer back to 10 years. That should be ours, 100%. I'm torn on the levy question because if there is a way for someone with a brand new, beautiful system that is clearly not going to pose a problem for many, many years.
How do you know that?
I don't, but if there is a backup, they would I'm guessing, get support for it, but it is not likely um, to present an obvious risk in the coming number of years. And therefore, those systems are inspected less frequently than the systems that are much more risky and therefore need a higher rate of inspection, if that is the scientific basis on which we go. Then I don't think the people who have just built the Rolls-Royce system should necessarily have to subsidize the families that do not have a system that we can count on.
My concern about that is that I have heard stories, when we were into the program, people had put brand new systems in, state-of-the-art systems, and had problems with them within a year. And there's no knowing that. I mean, you can say it's a state of the art, but there's no knowing what outside factors could impact that. That I just think that, if you're going to look at a sort of a sliding scale of a program, that some you're going to inspect more often than others, that becomes a greater challenge for staff to manage. And I'm seeing nodding heads. Madam CEO.
I understand that thought process. But in thinking of, say, someone installs a brand new system this year and presumably they'll be good for 20 years, but they pay, and I'll use an average of $5 a year on their tax bill. That's still only $100 over 20 years.
Councillor Richards.
Yeah, and I think what we're forgetting here is it's not just about having the system inspected, but we're all in it together. And it's about protecting our lakes that we all share together. So whether someone has a Rolls-Royce system or a class 1, we all share the lake that these are feeding into. So we all have an equal responsibility to pay for its protection.
Yeah, I agree. Although I don't agree that we're forgetting that the important thing is the health of our lakes, because that's why we're looking at having a system in the first place. So back to some of the questions and options that we've been asked about. I'm still concerned about, the thought that we might only be looking at systems that are 20 years or older. I personally, I can't agree with that, but I'd like us to be able to land somewhere, whether it's somewhere between 5 and 20, or whether we pick 10. I think we need to land on that and agree on that, because that's one of the questions that's been raised. Councillor Short-Reed.
I would like to know what you recommend, because you're the professional, I'm not.
Want my opinion or or staff
I
in
just wanna
general?
know.
Because my opinion is, all systems, all properties. Done.
But how often?
It's just cyclical. If it hopefully is gonna be 5-year turnaround, and if we can get it done quicker with innovations, fine. If the first cycle takes us 6, it takes us 6,
Well,
but that's what we're looking for, is just keep going, and we're not gonna exclude any that might be 5 years or newer. It's just everybody, every system,
Anything that's 5 years or older.
even brand new, I would suggest. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we did see, obviously, through the last program that we had, that there was some overlap. There was some program or some inspections that didn't get completed, or some work that needed to be done that didn't get done in a timely way. So there's always some follow-up that,
Yeah.
but that can be outside. So I'm hearing 5 years. Councillor Richards.
I guess there's a bit of an interpretation confusion in my head there about this 5 years. Are we looking to inspect the same system every 5 years, or just whether the system is 5 years old or not is the question?
The same, well, the 5 years or older, I think, is what
The
mayor
starting point.
is starting with, but yeah, we're gonna inspect everything, excluding the 5 years or newer, from what I hear. on a cyclical basis, whatever that is, and we're thinking we're basing it on a 5-year program, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, 5-year turnover. It seems to work, works for, it seemed to be a good, about 1,100 inspections a year, which is doable. And, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Richards?
So your recommendation would be perpetually cyclical with a goal of 5 years. It could be longer, but it wouldn't really be less. Like if you've inspected it within 5 years, you wouldn't do another inspection in 5 years unless there was a need because you found problems.
No, the program, maybe I'm not understanding 100%, but the program would be every 5 years. So yeah, I would hit the same system 5 years, every 5 years and look at it.
Make sure that it's continuing to operate the way it should.
Yeah. Not less than that. I mean, I threw that out there because I know that there's innovations that could be had that would probably streamline things and make it a little easier for us, but I think 5 years is a realistic number. Just
Well,
so-
and unless you knew that there were problems with the system, that you might have to go back and whatever remediation work had been required maybe hadn't been done, so that might trigger, a more frequent, but I can't see it,
Those will
doing
be
it
on
more often
an as
than.
need basis for sure. Yeah.
So that leads us to in-house or hiring a separate individual. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
In-house, hands down for me.
So existing staff look after it.
Or
We're not talking about a contractor. We're talking about, do we, in-house, when I say in-house, I mean, are our existing staff going to look after this? Or do we hire an additional person to look after it? That becomes part of the in-house.
yeah, I didn't get a sense from the report that there is capacity with the current staff load to do the job. So it would have to be an additional individual.
Depending on the frequency of inspections.
Right.
There would be capacity if it was like, say, every 20 years, but
But I think we've
Correct.
ruled that out. So on the basis of of the direction we're going in.
so you're saying hire somebody.
Yeah.
Okay, like seeing nodding heads. And on the levy or fee for service? I'm kind of hearing on the levy.
On the levy.
Okay, so the only other outstanding thing, and I know that she doesn't have a vote, but Councillor Barry she was very concerned about, okay, if we hire another staffer, is it a full-time, like, is there a sufficient work for them to be doing in the period of time when inspections aren't taking place? So I guess that could be resolved by us having a look at it at the job description. Like, I mean, that's going to be something that would be, so if we can see that, that would maybe give us a better sense of security or, surety that that's what's needed. I know that there has been a couple of suggestions about, well, why don't we contract somebody for the inspection period? But I do see that we wouldn't necessarily get the same level of qualifications for somebody who was just going to have a part-time job as opposed to a full-time job. But, I can see that there being some problems with hiring a part-time person.
There definitely is. We did, council will recall, we did try and recruit for a seasonal
Oh, that's right, we
contract
did.
and we're got nothing, not one application. So there's
Councillor-
some recruitment challenges around that.
Councillor Shortreed.
And I think if we use the 5,500 figure, 1,100 properties a year plus planning and everything else that's going to go into it, even to prepare for the next year, I think they'll be pretty busy.
The one other question that I've got is the amount. I mean, we've got an administrative assistant that's working half-time for building a bylaw and half-time for planning. How much of an impact is that going to have on, for instance, the balance of, say, how much work is being done by that person for building a bylaw versus for planning?
Through your Madam Mayor, yet to be determined. We don't know. Right now, I'm not utilizing the assistant to the full capacity. she's basically, she is helping out, but I haven't been able to, I haven't utilized her yet to full capacity, keeping in mind that I have a septic inspection program coming up. And I need to keep some of that time logged or, for this purpose, so. I don't know.
I'm just thinking if we're going to hire a separate individual to do inspections and do the administrative portion of it, I'm hoping that, you know, when we see the job description, that we can see that there would, you know, that's not going to have a greater impact on that administrative assistant person, or it's not going to have an impact on the support that's required by planning.
Yeah,
And we end up having to hire another administrative assistant.
It definitely will not take away from, the support of planning. And what I'm thinking that in the very busy times is that's when we're probably gonna be able to utilize for some of the, remedial letter mailings, whatever, that sort of menial tasks, because this will be something that would be taken over by the full-time staffer in the off season. Is the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to suggest that an administrative assistant only looks after menial
No.
tasks. So, just tongue in cheek. Okay, so any other questions by council? Have we responded to all the questions that you had?
Third-party inspections. So that would be allowing constituents to hire a
Right.
qualified third-party inspector to conduct the inspection instead of township staff conducting the inspection. In the last WSP program, it was approved as part of the program model. Not a tremendous amount of numbers as far as third-party inspections, but there definitely were some.
But I'm kind of thinking that the third-party inspection question would arise when we're doing a fee-for-service program where we wouldn't necessarily, you know, have to face that when we're looking at including it in the levy. I mean, I don't personally, I don't have any problem with somebody wanted to have a third-party inspection done with allowing that, as long as it doesn't create too many complications within our system. I can't really see why they would want to do that. But looking for comments, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Would you kindly remind me, would the third-party inspection extend to when a brand new system is put in? The person who's overseeing the installation of the new system can say, right, this is a good system, certified, wonderful, off you go. Or is it only in the case of running systems?
I believe we looked at this, the person who, was involved in the design and the install cannot sign off on it, for this purpose. It would have to be somebody else.
Which would, I mean, that's part of our inspection program. When somebody's building a new home and putting in a new system, that's part of your role.
Correct.
I can't see how, you know, somebody would want to have somebody else come in to look at the system if they know that it's, you know, I mean, they've already paid fees to us to do that.
Correct.
So bottom line on third parties.
I see no harm in it, recognizing that probably very few people will avail themselves of it. As so long as it's stipulated that they don't get a reduction on their tax levy because they've gone this route.
Good point.
Yeah.
Any other questions from council? Or anything, you know, that either of you gentlemen are thinking that you're not quite clear on, that what you've heard? I think we would like to see the job description come back to us for the new role. And you see how all the parts fit. Maybe we could hear what you've got for a resolution.
So from council discussion, it looks like option 2, pending review of the job description.
That's not quite, oh, wait a second, I'm looking at the. Okay. Everyone agree with that? So you want to read the resolution?
Be it resolved, council receives report BLDG 12/2025 regarding the septic reinspection program costing and model, and further the council directs staff to proceed with option 2 pending review of a job description.
Mover and a seconder, Counselor Richards, Counselor Short-Reed, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you, gentlemen. A lot of hard work done there. Excellent report. So I'm assuming that we're looking at this going forward in, sorry, next year. Okay. So next on the agenda is Parks, Recreation and Trails, and first item up is Fletcher Lake. Morning, Mr. Card.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council. So have the results back from the questionnaire for the Fletcher Lake Landing. I've compiled what we found as some common themes through those results up front. We had what I consider a fantastic response to this questionnaire. We had 43 respondents, which is, and all of them, I would say, had fantastic input, and it's been really helpful for the process. So thank you to everyone who took the time to be able to do that. I've summarized some common themes that were found throughout that questionnaire, and then given some recommendations based on those themes for each point for council's consideration. What I do with those recommendations is then bring them back to the consultant, start to talk about design options, start to talk about costing attached to that, and what each of those design options might look like as far as costing goes. And then depending on where we end up with that, we bring that information back to council and then look at what we want to finalize in the final design plans. We do the design. We have the money to work through the design and start getting into the tender process this year. It was budgeted, and then the construction would happen next fall. So there's a number of points with recommendations in this report, and through you, Mayor, if I may just briefly touch on each one, if
By
that
all
makes
means. Yep,
sense.
go ahead.
Okay, so number one is the turnaround area and access to boat launch. So most respondents mentioned that there's an issue with the turnaround area where it approaches the boat launch, and the fact that people tend to park in that turnaround area, which then causes issues with launching the boat. It's across from the boat launch. People pull up and then back into the boat launch. So the first recommendation there is to sign the turnaround area accordingly, essentially saying this is a no parking area. It's a turnaround area for launching boats. And the one consideration with that, however, is that this turnaround area is on Crown land. We realized that as part of our survey when we were doing the discovery work last year, and we are including this in our discussions for a lease process for Crown land with the M&R.
Lease or land use permit?
There's a number of different options. There's land use permit options, there's lease options, and then there's ownership options. And it sounds like right now, from what we've heard in recent meetings, is that a lease is the best solution upfront. And that's because to be able to do enforcement, to be able to apply our bylaws to it, although that has been a solution in the past, that's not what they recommend as the best solution going forward. So we're now going down the path of understanding what a lease would cost. The landship ownership process is much more onerous. It takes a long time, as we know from past experience, and it also be at market value. So that's probably the end goal with these types of locations, but an immediate solution is you can apply for a lease, you can apply for a work permit, you can get the work permit to do the work, then you work through the finalization of the lease. And that information would have to be considered much more broadly for some more of our parking discussions with like the Hawk Lakes, et cetera. But as of right now, we've had an initial meeting with M&R about it. We've, in discussion with the planner just yesterday, starting to put together some applications. He's received the application package from the M&R, and then we would know what kind of costing is associated with that.
So if we're putting forward applications, are we approaching them from as we improve each site, we put in an application for that land, or are we looking at, here's all of our docks and landing sites and here's the applications that we need to process, kind of like as a package?
The latter, right now, we're talking about the Hawks area and this location. And that'll give us a basis point for understanding for how we want to move forward, because we have no idea right now what a lease would cost. So we first want to go through that process, find out what this is going to look like, and then decide how broadly we want to go. And of course, council will be involved in that discussion.
Definitely would need to know the difference in cost between a land use permit and a lease.
Yeah. And that was our initial discussion with them, is the idea of, because it's something we've had success with for the water trails as an example. And something that they mentioned was that that was a process that was possible then, and it still works, and we'll continue using that process for the water trails, but it's not their best management practice going forward when you're in situations where you want to do enforcement on a site.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so thoughts on the parking and signage? Councillor Sirtreed, then Deputy Mayor Dayoun.
I know we definitely need signage. I know it's, the launching is really hard there and the parking is difficult, so definitely need something to do with the parking and signage to make the people not park where people are trying to launch, the tight boat launch.
But also creating, the need for greater enforcement or us inspecting on a regular basis. Deputy Mayor Dayoun?
Yeah, it sounds like the solution corresponds to the need really well. And, there is that delay with the M&R, but you're on it and they're going as fast as they can. So it sounds exactly right.
Did you have a comment? Okay. Okay. Next issue.
Sure, thank you. So item 2 is docking and mooring space. So currently the mooring space that's there is limited to one spot. It's really informal. Users have installed their own mooring rings along the retaining wall. The retaining wall is part of the entire replacement for this project. There's no dock on site. When I was initially reviewing the site, similar to that of Lower Fletcher, Skin Lake Landing, we thought, and what we learned there was the most cost-effective solution is to move to a docking system rather than the replacement of an entire retaining wall. Then the docking can add more mooring spaces. So we asked users the question of, do we need a dock and do we need more mooring space? So interestingly, it was very closely split. 15 respondents said they'd like to see a dock. 13 said, no, we don't need a dock. However, a number of people agreed that we need another mooring space. It's not a significantly high use site, and as in, like, it's not happening every weekend that there's congestion with people launching their boats. It's usually when people are launching in the spring and then taking it in the fall. So the general consensus is to add one more mooring space. So the recommendation is to take that information and look at what would be the most cost-effective solution between a retaining wall with another mooring space or a
And a
docking
docking
system
system.
with the mooring space available, and probably go down the path of what's the most cost-effective solution that makes the most sense for that site.
That would have been my question. What's the difference in cost of expanding the moorings area or putting in a dock?
Yeah.
So,
And in addition to that, sorry, through you, Mayor, is that there's, it became apparent through the survey, and I'll get into this a little bit later as well, is that It may not be deep enough right off of the wall to be the best for mooring boats, so a dock may address that need as well.
We're definitely getting into water depth issues in the most recent past. So that's a good point. Any questions on that? Councillor Shortreed?
What about moving the boat launch? Or is that going to be extremely expensive, making it a better launch than what it is now?
Yes, and through you, Mayor. So item 7 is talking about navigability of waterway, and that's something that I talk about there, but it makes sense as part of this as well, is that a number of people talk about some navigational hazards right outside the boat launch. Knowing that, and also some of the comments we received about how the turnaround area isn't straight in line with the boat launch area, it creates this kind of S pattern you have to back into. It might actually be most cost effective and efficient and make the most sense to just move the boat launch over a little bit. But until I read through this survey and started to think in that direction, I wasn't looking at the site that way. So we have to go back there and talk to the consultant about that, see whether or not that's possible. But a good outcome may be you move the boat launch over a little bit. You can widen it at the same time, put a dock in or the retaining wall.
And investigate the cost implications of those choices.
Yeah. Retaining walls tend to be, from what we've learned so far, the most expensive solution, although it's the most long lasting, but over the longevity of it compared to replacement costs now and the the maintenance over time, it's the most cost effective.
Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Yeah, I'm drawn philosophically to the retaining wall because a dock is a moving part. And it does have to be replaced more often. And you guys have to get out there twice a year and deal with it. Taking it in, putting it out, and it's just one less thing, frankly. So I presume your cost analysis will include that whole process over the course of X number of years. But for that reason, the retaining wall sort of speaks to me.
Councillor Richards, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. My one question was about the mooring spaces versus the retaining wall, but depth is certainly a consideration there. I think we ought to go with whatever is going to be the most cost effective while still trying to meet all of these concerns, many of which I feel. So I completely see that maybe on a smaller scale, it's the same, many of the same issues we see at other landings. So, um, you know, uh, it's going to take a lot of work, and I'm scared about the cost. I'll be completely honest.
So we obviously, when we're talking to a consultant or looking for pricing, we need to put options on there so we can literally see what the most cost-effective thing to do is. Looking at the things that have been raised about, the amount of maintenance that's required for a docking system versus the longevity of a retaining wall and mooring on the retaining wall.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
And so I think what I do is we target one additional mooring space, so we'd end up with 2 mooring spaces, and whatever ends up being the most cost-effective solution would be what council would see a recommendation on to achieve 2 mooring spaces.
Agreed? Okay.
Item 3, parking availability, delineation and signage. So 32% of respondents feel that the parking area and access from the road require improvements. So again, this is very much related to people launching their boats and people parking in the way. So further signage throughout the rest of the area, just indicating where you can park, where you shouldn't park, with that in mind. And then in consideration of additional parking, looking at what's possible there right now within the existing footprint. So several people mentioned, and we noted this on site when we were doing our own assessments, we can probably gain some areas just by doing some brush removal and some tree removal, like some small tree removal. and some trimming of trees. So take that opportunity now. And then at the same time, look at where we might be able to gain some parking without significant work. And then as that discussion develops and what kind of cost is associated with that, whether or not we're able to do it as part of this project or include it in our parking philosophy discussion as we move forward, we would at least just have that baseline of information. So my recommendation being that we do some brush clearing, we do some more signage throughout the area. We have the discussion about where we might be able to gain parking. And depending on that costing, council will decide whether or not we have that information for future implementation with the parking discussions, or if we're able to do it as part of this project.
Two things. One thing, you know, it's not just a matter of brushing. If you brush an area and you want parking there, you have to have fill. So we need to consider that as well. And I'm just kind of wondering what council's thoughts are about, you know, leaving the parking discussion until we have the overall parking. Then we have to go back to certain sites and do more work again, or whether we should be trying to resolve each site as we go along. Deputy Mayor Dayuk, then Councillor Richards, then Councillor Shortreed.
Yeah, I say it's on our plate. Let's eat it. You know, let's do it right now,
Mhm.
for sure. And if there is any maneuverability with MNR that pops up now, it's going to inform the broader conversation. I certainly wouldn't delay.
Maneuverability, how so?
Well, in our conversations about anything that might happen, you know, regarding the Crown land, in our debates with MNR now, that is evidence for how we approach MNR spots for the future.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're debating with M&R. We're just investigating how we can go forward. I don't think there's a debate.
Incorrect term then, negotiation, conversation.
Councillor Richards?
Yeah, I think when you're already in the throes of redesigning a launch area, you want to look at everything at the same time, because doing otherwise is only going to add to cost later.
Mhm.
So, you know, we should look at the parking, the loading, unloading zone. That is a particular concern around the launch. Um, all of these recommendations really are things we need to look at and plan for. So, you know, the time is now for that conversation.
Councillor Shortreed?
My thoughts exactly. There's no point going back and doing the work all over again when we're already there.
Okay, I think the next item is camping, or did I jump ahead to?
Item 5, loading and unloading zone.
Okay,
So like most landings, and we see through these questionnaires, people use the retaining wall areas, loading and unloading zones, pull up with their vehicle, put their groceries, etc. And also, you know, larger items that might need to go out to the water access only cottages, like a fridge or freezer or something like that. So this would be in consideration of, as we build that space, ensure there's a designated loading and unloading zone near to the dock, near to the landing where people are mooring. That would be signed and graded appropriately.
and that signage is clear that they can't stay parked there after they've,
Yeah, so a lot of signage, yeah.
okay, any comments on loading and unloading? Hearing none, then camping?
Yes, so currently there's a no camping sign there. And some respondents have expressed that camping has caused issues in the past. It sounds like from the respondents, it's not an immediate problem, but there is signage in place. The issue again is that if people are camping on the Crown land that's there and we don't have the lease rights over it, we can't do anything essentially to enforce that signage. We can on our own property that's there, which we know the delineation of. We do have the shore road allowance there. And we don't have any bylaws, of course, prohibiting camping in the location or at landings. So My recommendation would be to, on top of that, we do have authority under the Trespass to Property Act to essentially regulate any rules in a place on township property. So as of right now, with the lack of a bylaw, we would be, if someone were camping on our side of the property, we'd be letting them know that and telling them we don't want them to camp there and asking them to leave, or else they're trespassing essentially. So my recommendation is reinstall the new no camping signage. Include this in the consideration of the Crown land acquisition process, and give future consideration to a bylaw for no camping at public landings.
Richard, sorry.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're at that point in life where we've got to do a lot more enforcement at our landings and our sites. I've even seen RVs pull into the log chute parking lot and stay. So we're there. We're a popular area. People like to travel the country in RVs, and it's not, maybe in our area, not enough places for them to go, but unfortunately, a landing is not a place for that.
So any other comments on the camping and the recommendation? Okay. Navigability.
Yes, so a number of folks mentioned that there's navigational hazards in the waterway out on the lake as you leave the launch. Now, there's nothing we can do as far as any navigation hazards out on the lake. A number of folks have asked that we put out buoy markers, etc. That's outside of our jurisdiction. So for the benefit of anybody listening to this, I do want to make that apparent. However, there is some things right around the retaining wall, and one of them is what appears to be an old foundation of perhaps a past dock or a past retaining wall. So my recommendation is that we do what we can in the immediate vicinity of the retaining wall as we do this. Look to remove that hazard because it's right there. It's clearly part of the past infrastructure. But not take any action as far as putting out marker buoys in the lake.
Thoughts about removal of the old structure, Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we've inherited this. It's been downloaded to us, and so we are responsible even for things that have happened in the past. We've got to be cognizant of that. So removing it if we can. And I also agree, no buoys on our part. I think best practice from other lake associations is that the lake association figures that out and does it and purchases them, and I think that would be the way to go across the board.
Okay.
Item 8 is the boat launch. So as mentioned previously, the respondents indicate that the boat launch could stand to be widened and deepened. And some mention that it should be hardened as well. There's no
It should be, I'm sorry, it should be.
hardened. So I'll explain that a little bit. There's no concrete slabs. There's no boat launch slabs. It's just a natural lake bottom there. What we did at Skin Lake, Lower Fletcher Lake, was just add aggregate gravel to harden the base. And this helps with any like washing out of the area from prop wash, we call it, from props of boats as they get onto their trailer, just kind of blow out holes in the launch. And at the same time, people have suggested it should be widened for two reasons. One, for construction barge access, and also to allow better access when people are backing up from that turnaround area into it, to align it with that. So my recommendation is to aim to make the boat launch more easily accessed and navigable. So the width and the location review as part of that consideration, as we were discussing earlier. And see whether or not it makes sense to maybe just widen it a little bit to, if you're looking at the boat launch to the left, so it's going to then align with the backup area and widen the launch at the same time and put gravel down.
The rationale behind that sounds reasonable, as long as we're not widening it because we need to accommodate bigger boats that people have got. Because I mean, I think we've all kind of agreed, look, we're going to replace like with like. And, unless we run into, challenges like we're seeing in certain areas, I think people just need to realize that these are the launches that we've got and they need to have recreational toys that suit. Councillor Richards.
I think if we're looking at it right now to modernize the launch, deeper grade if appropriate is good to look at while we're there. The other thing is about the construction use of the launch, and I think it's something we've talked about before. That construction use of a launch has a much deeper effect than our property owners using it to launch their boats in spring and fall, or when they want to use a lake. Often construction companies using equipment that is damaging to the launch, and that excessive heavy use is costing us. And so I'm wondering if we can look at permitting or memorandums of understanding for construction companies that are utilizing our launches to be held responsible or accountable for those damages that it's costing the taxpayers.
Go ahead.
It's not something we do now. I certainly agree that larger equipment, particularly if you're getting into something like dumping aggregate and then loading aggregate onto a barge, moving the barge back and forth. This is something that's common at all of the landings. I think just off of the top of my head, like a permitting system, although not impossible, would be onerous. I think it'd be a much larger consideration if council wanted to look at something in that direction. But my mind immediately goes towards, you're now having a permit system and a tracking system associated with permitting and a staffing system that checks on these locations before and after they show up. And from what I see in throughout the township, you could be talking about hundreds of times in a year. And then there's bylaw follow-up if there were any issues that needed followed up on after. Of course, again, all things that are possible, but I probably be some sort of like software and staffing, et cetera, additional staffing.
Well, and trying to establish memorandums of understanding with any and all contractors that might be involved in construction, it's a bit of a challenge. Go ahead.
Well, I totally agree. It is a bit of a challenge, but how do we hold them accountable? I have seen a lot of damage done by contractors, and then because there's no accountability, there's no fear of the equipment that they're using, which is often quite heavy duty. And so how do we protect our launches and our taxpayers from those issues?
Madam CAO.
If that's something that council's interested in us researching, perhaps we could take the time to do that and bring something back rather than trying to, come up with something on the top of our head.
Okay, well, just maybe give that some thought. And any other thoughts about that? Okay. So I guess we're now looking at the retaining wall height.
Yes, so this is a question we always ask based on experience with previous launch projects, and most everyone agrees that the retaining wall height is perfect. Doesn't need to be lowered or raised. There's never been noted instances where the water's gone over the retaining wall, so we don't need to worry about that. So the recommendation is I just provide this information to the design consultant to create a benchmark for the design height, and we'd be aiming for that height with any new infrastructure.
Sounds good if everybody's, basically satisfied with what's existing.
Yeah.
Any comments about that? Okay, message board. Are these message boards used a lot?
When I'm at locations, I never see them getting used. However, when we ask people, they say, yes, we use them. And we asked folks, would they use a message board if we reinstall it? Do they use the current ones? The majority answered yes and yes. Based on that, and some folks also mentioned that they'd like to see some additional things like species at risk signage and loon warning signage and some wake control.
And who's
signage.
responsible for doing all of that?
My recommendation is that we'd install the message board, and similar to what we've seen at other lakes with cottage associations, is they then have the opportunity to, as an association, post those types of messages.
Yeah, the only thing about them, and I get that, and I think that it is a good opportunity for lake associations to get the message out about things that are concerning to them, and they're increasing. It's just the fact that, more message boards, more maintenance, more replacement costs. Anyway, any thoughts on the message board? Councillor Richards.
Yeah, I think most lake associations do use the message boards at various launches. And to your point about, the signage regarding loon nesting or invasive species, like I think that's really critical to be at the launches. One thing I was wondering about was like a pump at our launches so that people can spray off the hulls of their boats when they're pulling out to go to another lake. It's not really something we have, but there's certainly like Ontario signage that tells everybody to do that, but we don't have
Do
any
they?
pumps at our lakes to do it. So when we're looking at this whole project, is that something that we could throw in there to see costing on?
Guess we'd have to know what the cost of doing that would be, the cost of replacement and maintaining it. Go ahead, Chris.
My immediate thought was something like that is a pump needs electricity, so you'd be bringing hydro in, and then you'd have plumbing. Plumbing then needs winterized. So again, infrastructure costs and maintenance associated with it.
What about those like simple fire pumps that a lot of lake associations have put out to protect from wildfires? Is that something that would be appropriate for us to put in at a launch?
I'm not familiar with those. I'm not familiar with them at all. I
There
haven't
have been
seen
some
one.
mixed responses about lake associations having fire pumps and whether that's a good idea or not. And I have heard fire chiefs say that they're not necessarily supportive of that. But, there have been instances where they've definitely been helpful and beneficial. So it's, there's some mixed thoughts associated with that.
I was thinking about their technology being appropriate for hull cleaning while avoiding the electrical needs of a full pump.
Go ahead.
And I'm not sure. I'm not aware of any sort of pump system that wouldn't require hydro. The dry hydrants we have at our landings that the fire department has installed, you're actually sucking water up through them with a pumper. So I'm not sure you'd be able to without hydro.
Well, and I mean, to me, it's another thing that, you know, that we're adding to costs, to replacement costs and maintenance. And, you know, I guess we'd need to know, you know, what the, um, sort of the details of that would be. Deputy Mayor Dayu?
I'd be really happy to throw that onto the agenda for the Environment and Stewardship Committee because it is an important environment issue that pertains to our community, and it could be the little bit of homework on our side can help just facilitate the conversation here. What do other communities do? What other cottage communities, and just bring back a couple of examples of what exists elsewhere.
Thoughts on that? Certainly can have the discussion. You know, see what comes of that discussion. You know, I would definitely want to know, you know, what the, you know, both the pros and cons of doing something like that are. I mean, acknowledging the importance of, you know, the issue that you raised in the first place of, you know, washing the boats down and making sure that we're not transferring species, you know, hazardous species from one lake to another. But, you know, we also have to look at what the costs and implications are. So sure, add that to your list of things to look at. When is your next meeting or your first meeting?
It's on the 30th, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so I think we, generally, are we agreeing that a message board is important, is something that should be replaced? Okay,
And through you, Mayor, that is the final question is just, is there any other opportunities council would like to consider?
no, you know, other than hearing that, you know, we'd like to take care of like each landing as an entire package as opposed to waiting for, you know, further discussions. Like if we need to do something about parking or adding more turnaround space, we need to look at that now. And resolve it now as opposed to coming back at a future date and having, you know, further costs associated with it. So any other questions or thoughts? Okay, maybe you could read a resolution that you've got.
Be resolved, council receives Park Recreation and Trails Report PRT 1925 regarding Fletcher Lake Landing Community Questionnaire Survey results and recommendations, and that council concurs with the recommendations in the report, and further council directs staff to provide the said recommendations to the project consultant to determine cost estimates in support of the design phase.
Okay, mover and a seconder. Councillor Stewart Reed, Deputy Mayor Dayu. All in favor? That's carried. Anything on the monthly activity report that you'd like to highlight? And then I think we will call for a break for 15 or 20 minutes.
Sure, yeah, a couple quick things. We have had an initial kickoff meeting with our parking consultant, and we're aiming for a council staff engagement process for the October 16th council agenda. So council can expect to hear more about that. We're just having our project kickoff meeting with our construction company and our consultant for the Russell Landing Rehabilitation Project. That's happening tomorrow. And then from that, we'll have actual construction startup date. So residents and cottage association will end up getting a notification about what to expect there as far as any disruption to parking and access to the dock there as we get into that project in the coming weeks. And then finally, starting this weekend is our fall color traffic control program at the tower. So from this weekend until the end of October, October 26th, which is our closing date, we'll have our traffic controllers in place each weekend, including paid duty OPP out on the highway. That's it.
Any questions or thoughts on the activity report? I have a mover and a seconder then to receive it. Councillor Richards, Councillor Short Reed.
Moved by Counselor Richard, seconded by Counselor Short-Reed, be it resolved that council receives Park Recreation Trails Report PRT 2025 regarding monthly activities for the month of August for information.
All in favor? That's carried. So we will break for 20 minutes. I guess that, well, depending on how accurate the clock is, that would bring us back at 11:45. Welcome back to the meeting. We're still under Parks, Recreation and Trails. The next item up for a general discussion is our concerns that have been raised about Crown Lake. And while I have had quite a bit of correspondence and discussion about this, this was asked to be on the agenda by Deputy Mayor Dayu. So over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, and this issue isn't new for any of us. We've touched upon it at council in the past. And I think all of us have at one stage or another received correspondence from the Crown and Wolf Lake constituents about it. There is a public launch. It's an Algonquin Highlands launch, very narrow, but surrounded by a considerable amount of Crown land, which is open space, which has been over the course of this last number of years been taken over for several weeks at a time by RVs and communities of folk who are coming up in a planned and organized way to use that space for big chunks of the summer. We've heard multiple times from local constituents that this is a big problem. For a number of reasons. The waste left behind is extraordinary, and they've submitted photos to us showing what kind and quantity of waste is left behind. There is not adequate provision either in the RVs or wherever they're camping for human waste. So there are a number of privy locations dotted around the space, some of which have a beautiful view over the lake. They're extremely close to the lake. None of them have been well installed, and they are often just left behind. So when you go into that space after these groups have left, you find open privies with toilet paper strewn everywhere and old toilet seats that have just been left behind. It's a real dump. It's an absolute dump. And so there are concerns on a few different fronts. One is the simple abuse of that space. It is believed, although I don't believe anyone has certifiably quantified it, that some of these groups are there longer than what the Public Lands Act would recommend or would legislate as being possible, which is 21 days. There is a general destruction of the local environment. There is obviously all of this waste that is left behind, and I think the challenge that that our constituents face, and we've seen this in other situations at other lakes as well, is what happens when there is waste left behind in a public area, or when docks have floated down and been left to rot somewhere, and the local community want to take responsibility for that and get rid of that waste. We have no capability within the township to waive fees for big items that come through. And we've talked about that on a few occasions about how complicated that becomes, and the implications for waiving fees for Good Samaritans who are bringing things that they are not responsible for, but they want to take up and get rid of on our collective behalf. It's an outstanding question because there is no immediate answer there. So there is that. There are also worries about road access. When you've got 13 or 15 or 20 cars that are lining the roads on both sides. Those of you who've been up there will recall the Crown Lake Road is not a paved road. It's very much a back cottage road. It's an old logging road. And should there be an emergency that of a fire truck that needs to get through or an ambulance, the road is extremely restricted at those places where there is an overcrowding of vehicles.
Who owns the road?
Sorry?
Who owns the road?
The road, that section of the road, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the ones that was identified as we thought was ours, but then realized after our conversations regarding Bear Lake Road, I think there were 4 sections. I'm looking at Sean in the distance. I think there were 4 areas or roads that were further identified as being M&R roads. And I believe this landing falls within one of those sections, but we have been maintaining it as a seasonal road. And the decision made a couple of years ago was to continue to maintain it as a seasonal road, unless I'm mistaken in that regard.
Looks to me like Mr. O'Callaghan might have a comment.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council. So that section of road that we were maintaining, I believe, was closer to Livingston Lake Road, I believe. This section where the camping's taking place, it appears to be falling most certainly within Crown. So it was not an area that we were exploring
Okay,
obtaining ownership of.
okay, right, but we obviously send our emergency vehicles through there when we need to. And I don't know if we maintain a little bit of that section of road or we don't at all. I don't know. That's fallen outside of mine.
It's my understanding we do not.
we do not, okay.
At that section, no.
So it's a pretty onerous road to get through. So when you've got additional vehicles along the sides, it just makes access, especially for emergency vehicles, all that more difficult. And there's also the salt in the wound, and I do get it for our constituents who are going through this area time and time again, that here they have to abide by all of our townships bylaws, which are there for a reason, our septic reinspection program, which is there for a reason. You know, all of these things are in place to protect and enhance this beautiful corner of the world that we live in. And all of these things cost money for which they are paying. And then here come a bunch of folk who are not taxpayers to Algonquin Highlands, who are not abiding by our bylaws, nor do they have to because they are operating on Crown land, and they're largely, and I do say this with a great deal of photographic evidence and personal experience from having gone, degrading the very environment that all of our bylaws are there to, you know, to protect.
And
that's-
the reason why they're going there in the first place. I mean,
Yeah.
they're going there to be in a beautiful location.
Yeah, yeah. So the circumstance is that section of land, and I'll let staff speak to it further, is not within our jurisdiction. It's an M&R chunk of land, which means that we cannot apply our bylaws to that space. But the Public Lands Act, under which this chunk of land falls, is really out of date. You know, it was written back, I think it was in 1990, at a time when people were using Crown land with their pup tent and their canoe and going off for a few days and coming back. And it has not been updated in the intervening years, where we're seeing increasing RV access and people staying for longer amounts of time and doing more permanent activities there. We have, as Haliburton County, done a delegation to Roma on this a couple of years ago. In fact, this morning I pulled out our delegation documentation, and it very much remains the same situation today as it was then. Haven't heard anything changed. And I also recall, you know, we had this conversation about Livingston Lake Road Pit, where a considerable difficulty was
Let's stick to
experienced.
Crown Lake.
My point in raising it, though, is that this is not a one-off. This is happening in other places around our township. So it's not necessarily only a question about discussing what to do about Crown Lake. There is that issue, and then there is the broader issue that we are facing across our township, and I would say across other parts of our county as well. So the question that I raised to council is there something that we can do in support of this complex problem, which extends up to community safety and security, that we can do on behalf of our constituents or alongside our constituents in order to make inroads into remedying it? Either, you know, at minimum, a letter to the M&R restating our concern or engaging in further conversation with them. What might we do to really try to resolve this? Because it's getting worse year by year.
Councillor Shortreed.
Have any of the property owners contacted the game warden, because they have the authority to look after illegal dumping?
I can't speak to the game warden. I know they have contacted the tips line several times.
They probably,
With no result.
but I know for a fact, because I've helped a game warden investigate illegal dumping, because they brought garbage to me to see if I knew where it came from. So, I mean, they do have a lot of authority if you look into it, what they can and can't do on Crown land. So it might be a serious option, because they are in that area a lot. They're up there, like the Dagger Lake Access Road, they're up there all the time. It's only 10 minutes away from there, so would be an option.
Mr. O'Callaghan.
Thank you. So some of the correspondence I've been reviewing, it looks like the M&R they're involved to some degree, but they have noted that the area or a portion of the area in question appears to be on a township shore road allowance. Now, we don't have any surveys confirming that, but M&R mapping suggests that there may be a shore road allowance there, which would be under our jurisdiction. So if council is going to be directing staff to really be investigating this further, we will need a survey to some degree to actually show those boundaries and where it crosses over to Crown land, which would most definitely be under the jurisdiction of the ministry then. So there's a bit of a further information needed from a staff perspective to be able to move forward in any capacity on this matter.
I found it interesting. I don't disagree that, you know, it's a good idea for us to look at developing some correspondence to send and just voicing some, you know, continued concerns. As far as us, you know, taking on changing the Lands Act, I think that's a step too far, given the kind of response that we get from M&R on much smaller issues. We seem to be having a lot of challenges, you know, with really small issues, like trying to find out, look at how much time has been spent. I don't know how many meetings that have been had, and just, okay, like, how can we acquire small parcels of land that we want to use? And interesting to discover that the response from MNRF would be, well, we think it might be on your land, not our land. But the problem is not just our land, or like it's more all encompassing. And as you say, it's not just Crown Lake. That it's a problem. And I really feel for the people that are living. I'm not sure how many residents, or do you know how many cottages there are on Crown Lake?
Between Crown and Wolf, there are relatively
Crown
few.
Lake, Crown Lake.
If I'm not mistaken, we're looking at like 6 or 8, 5. It is relatively few.
There's a total of 8 properties. I believe 3 are water access and one of them is owned by the township.
You know, I have to applaud the work that has been done by them to try and clean up the area, to try and be responsible citizens. And I feel for the frustrations that they've had with respect to, you know, bringing material to the landfill sites and having to pay a fee for certain things, being frustrated because they're, you know, the landfills are not accepting unsorted waste. But I mean, that's another problem in its entirety. We don't accept unsorted waste and can't. And I'm not quite sure how we would deal with exceptions, you know, to proving where things are coming from. I mean, we know that there's a specific problem in this area, but I think that we could very well run into an awful lot of circumstances where people are bringing material to the landfills and saying, well, this is not mine. I'm just cleaning up a public area. How do we know that? How do we, you know, sort through that? And how do we waive fees for some and not for others? And, you know, that becomes, I think, an extremely complicated issue. What we want to do going forward with, you know, do we want to pay for a survey? B, do we want to acquire, you know, some Crown land in the area? You know, and I'm sorry to say this, but is the cost that's associated with all of this worth it for the number of residents that are there? Then we have to have bylaw officers going there on a regular basis, checking it out. More stress or, you know, impact put on what the bylaw department has to do. So there's a lot of implications, a lot of cost implications associated with this. Councillor Richards, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's very alarming with the cost associations affected to it. That being said, you know, to me, the number of cottagers on Crown doesn't really matter. I think we have a greater problem in, you know, with us having the amount of Crown land that we are surrounded by, and the fact that, you know, camping is allowed on Crown land, and essentially the MNR is underfunded and, you know, just doesn't have the ability to police it the way that it needs to be policed, given that we're a popular area for tourism. We're a popular area for backcountry camping. And this is a problem that maybe we're aware of on Crown, but I'm sure is happening across the board in areas that we're not even being told about. And it's alarming for, debris that's left behind. It's alarming to the environment in our woodlands. It's alarming to our lakes. It's alarming when it comes to fires and the potential for that debris to create wildfires in areas where there's not a lot of people. So I do think it's worth having further discussions with MNR, further discussions with the province on how do they help fund and enable us as a township to work with them or fund themselves to deal with this problem before it becomes much bigger, because that's where it's headed. People are going to camp wherever they can for cheap, and it is going to become a greater and greater issue. And it's not something that we can just ignore. I mean, we've all heard about the success story of us on the Hawks, where they were complaining about that before the water trails camping sites were established. Is Crown an opportunity to do something where we can police it? Maybe. I'm not sure. It is expensive. Even what we do, it's costing us more to operate those campsites than it is, um, uh, you know, for what people are paying for them. We can only take that so far before it's a significant burden to our taxpayers. So we need that cooperation from the province to deal with this matter.
I don't, I certainly think that it's valuable to look at the, at communicating with MNRF, what our concerns are. I have to say, and I'm sorry to say it, but I don't have a lot of faith in there being any kind of financial support or ability on their part to be able to enforce it or clean things up. They just don't seem to have the capacity to do that anymore. And I'm not sure, I mean, we've made probably at least four delegations to the province, to MNRF, about, this overall issue. And it all comes down to the same thing, and we are absolutely no further ahead. And, what steps we can take to improve things, I'm not sure what level of success we would have. Writing to them, asking for meetings with them, we can do that. We can see, what sort of level of success we have. But, I just sort of, when you see the response from one of the MNRF representatives saying, well, call a hot tips line. You know that's not going to have the kind of results that we're looking for. It's certainly not going to resolve the concerns that that we see. Looking at the photographs of what was being left behind there is just like terrible, absolutely terrible. I really do feel for the people that live in the area, which is one of the reasons why I did. I know that primarily the correspondence was with you, but at some point, they were concerned because they were writing to a basket full of people and not getting any responses from anyone. And, I did sort of say, look, here's how our responses work. You're not going to get responses from everybody, but, tried to respond to some of their concerns. But I mean, it certainly doesn't solve the problem in any way, shape or form. Sorry. Anyway, thoughts about what we can do going forward.
I understand what you are saying about, we've tried to take a kick at this can several times and it's been challenging. I don't think for me that's a sign to stop taking kicks at it.
No, I'm not suggesting that we do stop.
And I am interested in having conversations with them that approach a more policy level, knowing that we're not peers. I get that. But if there was a way that we could reach out to other townships that are experiencing the same. I think we've got 80 or 90% crown land inside Algonquin Highlands, whereas in Dysart, they don't, I don't believe they have any. So it isn't necessarily like for like across Haliburton, but perhaps some of our other township neighbors are experiencing similar concerns and would be interested in working on this piece of advocacy at a stronger policy level. So that's sort of the upper level. The intermediate level would be, I wonder if this is a space that council and staff would consider um, taking on board inside our broader negotiation with the province on either leasing or taking over some sort of I've lost the term. Not property control. What's the other term we've been using?
I'm not quite sure what it is you're,
Like a land permit, thank you. Or some other mechanism by which we can enforce our bylaws on that space and on similar spaces, so that we know that across the township, when we have issues like this, we have more flexibility to act. And I know that doesn't exist elsewhere, but we're a unique space, and I think it is one of those times when looking outside of the box for solutions is a worthwhile conversation to have. And then indeed, on the most concrete localized level, simply advocating with and on behalf of our constituents for higher level of control over that space, more regular drive-bys by the MNR, just like we do with the OPP, in just saying, this is a tight spot for us, it's a problem area for us, could you please go by a little bit more frequently? And I think we've gained some traction with the OPP in some of those spaces. Could we apply a similar approach with with the MNRF and Crown Lake? I would, I'd take any or all of the above, but I would like to see it move forward.
go ahead, Sean.
Thank you. I mean, given the level of destruction that is taking place and damage to the area, I see there being some value in at least exploring the option of having a survey completed. Then we know exactly what we're dealing with as far as, township jurisdiction versus crown jurisdiction. And then from there, we can, formulate some sort of plan on whether to further restrict the activity from taking place on township land, and then it really gets pushed back to the crown to enforce if it's taking place on crown land. Or exploring the option of, a lease or memorandum of understanding or ownership of the property through our discussions with the ministry. I mean, a survey is going to be required for any of that in the future anyways. But dealing with or having a survey completed will help, I think, guide this discussion.
I can certainly see us, moving forward with some, first of all, starting with correspondence, voicing our concerns about the misuse of the land and the inability to police that by the MNR. I'm seeing if there's, any room for negotiation there. I'm concerned, okay, if we're going to do a survey of Crown Lake and the area around Crown Lake, where else are we going to be able, or where else are we going to be required to do surveys? How much, we're talking about what could be a considerable amount of money here in surveys and enforcement. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, but I think we need to be careful in how we approach this and what impact it's going to have on our taxpayers. I see your hand up, and then we'll come back to you, Chris.
And perhaps something for council to consider is, and I mean, just going back to the Fletcher Lake discussion is, I mean, we heard from those residents as well, certainly not to the same degree as Crown Lake is experiencing, but there are camping issues there as well.
On a number of lakes.
And so, exactly. And so, council could consider, looking into the survey and acquiring that when the launch is ready to be worked on. And I'm not sure when that is, Chris, and I'm sorry if I put you on the spot for that. But that would put it in the cycle to look at getting a lease or a land use permit at that time, along with the survey, the same process that we follow now.
Well, and that's, in our discussion earlier about Fletcher Lake, let's do it all at once, like when, but the unfortunate part is, where is Crown Lake on the schedule? How far down the road is it? I mean, I know for absolutely certain sure that we're going to hear about other boat launches and work that needs to be done, or that folks think need to be done at other boat launches in the area, particularly this year because of low water levels. and needs to be done now. And it, like, where, are you know, maybe we need to take another look at the schedule, just as part of the, you know, the work that we do going forward. Go ahead, Chris, sorry.
No, that's great. And when I had put up my hand at the same time Angie had, I had the exact same thought, is that this is how we initially decided to prioritize these, recognizing that there's 27 launches, a number of them need work, and it's anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 to get a survey. And then once you get into looking at acquiring crown land, you then have to survey that crown land, which when we looked at Fletcher Landing, if we wanted to buy that property, that survey alone was costed us potentially being in the $50,000 range, just depending on how far you have to survey back. So I had that same thought process, and where Crown Lake is on that list, I don't know off the top of my head. I apologize. It wouldn't be in the 5-year plan at the moment. Just because it isn't one of the ones that the condition of the boat launch was listed as poor that we're addressing as priorities at the moment. Certainly we'd have the ability to look at that priority list and where it falls within it. Absolutely. But in the meantime, I'm just thinking about the M&R enforcement there, and my mind goes to the past, and I've been here long enough now that I recall my predecessor, Mark Coleman, he had been involved in some of these initial discussions in 2011, and I'd say at that time it had come to what came to a head as well. And I was a contract staff at the time. I was involved in actually doing some of the garbage cleanup there. And my recollection is those discussions at that time and with the M&R did lead to them doing some additional patrols and some additional enforcement. They even put up some signage there to communicate to people saying that they were going to do as such. I haven't been there in a little while to know whether or not that signage is still in place, but I'm saying that to show that they've had staff turnover. They've been made aware outside of us bringing this up to them. It may have been the first time, and the current staff base, I mean, and they did successfully a few times when they started going there during that time. The problem seemed to go away for at least a little while. So I look at it as we have Crown land camping on Crown land, which is permitted. That's a policy discussion. And then we have illegal dumping. And they have in the past sent more people there and dealt with it. And I think probably they just have enough staff, new staff, that they don't realize the issue that's there until the residents start bringing it more and more to their attention. The M&R tips line, I do know when you do phone them, what is helpful is that, and I go through this with our own enforcement on campsites, is that when somebody calls you afterwards and says they found some garbage in the woods, it's very hard to tie that to a person. Because you look at the last reservation for a person, you call them or you talk to them and they say, yeah, that garbage was there when we got there, unless you find a piece of mail or something. So what's often helpful at those times is somebody can say, we just saw people throw garbage in the woods and they're there right now, and here's their license plate number, and then the M&R can go out and actually give a fine. So making sure they're calling the right people.
Well, good point. You know, I can see at least a couple of steps from a broader perspective. One is for us to work on drafting a letter to M&R voicing our concerns about, you know, the use of their land and their response to that misuse of their land. I'm also thinking that it might be beneficial to draft a correspondence to go out to, I hate to say it, but all the municipalities in Ontario that have to just see if we can get a response to say, hey, yeah, we're having the same problem. And I know, like, I really have lost faith in the benefit of delegations. There have been at least 4 delegations to M&R and absolutely no reaction. But what might be more beneficial is if we write to all of the municipalities in the province and just correlate the numbers of responses that say, yeah, like we're right on the case with you. We have the same problem. We have the same issues. And then be able to go to Roma during the bear pit and saying, look, we've got responses from, 247 municipalities saying have the same issue. And you have been, approached about this issue for years and we want something done about it. And I think when the whole room of, say 1,500 people hear that concern, that puts a little bit more pressure on them than one municipality saying like, when are you going to do something about this? So, I think that there are like a list of things that we can do that hopefully will have a greater impact than just us. I know it's not just us. And I mean, some of the delegations have been made on behalf of the municipality. Some of the delegations have been made on behalf from the county, sort of looking at it from a broader picture. You mentioned, the number of years ago that this started. There's actually things on our website that indicate that there's been reports on Crown Lake since 2008. 2011 or 2010, 2011. And, so it's just, their inability to deal with or respond to the same concerns being raised over and over and over again is pretty frustrating. So I don't know what you think about that approach, but I think, it's at least taking some action and going beyond our, our own boundaries. I'm not sure what I think about moving right ahead with agreeing to doing a survey at Crown Lake, because I still think, we need to look at the approach we talked about earlier. If maybe we need to see the list of priorities and determine whether, we want to reprioritize some of where they are. Mind you, the prioritization has been done by asset management work, based on the condition. But there's also, public response and reaction and impact that maybe we need to consider. I mean, it's hard to say whether we would move forward with Crown Lake before we did some other locations where there are similar impacts, not greater number of people. I hate to say, well, there's only so many residents on a lake. They're all equally, I mean, we're responsible for responding to them equally. But, in some of the locations that we've been talking about where there are concerns, there's a lot more people involved. And the problem is probably greater than the one that, we're talking about right now. But anyway, that's kind of what I propose. I'd like to hear what people think about going ahead with a survey of Crown Lake area right now, or whether we should wait on that. Councillor Short-Reed, then Councillor Richards.
If my memory serves me correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a big campsite. So the area, I think down where the boat launch is kind of steep and you get away from the boat launch to where they camp. So I don't think that the actual camping is in a survey would never be part of that areas. I'm 95% sure it's on.
But we can't prove that.
I know, I understand that. I'm just saying.
So the question is, do we need to proceed with the survey for this issue, or do we need to look at the, sort of top down, bigger
I
picture
just
down?
can't see doing a survey because I don't think that it's going to prove any point.
Deputy Mayor, do you?
There are privies, however, which have been put, and I kid you not, virtually overhanging the lake so close to the shoreline. And I wonder if a survey could at least help us to control the very specific area around the shoreline. And if we did do a survey and we realized that a big chunk of the camping itself is taking place within our shore road allowance, it could put pretty short work to the issue of controlling that site. So there is an advantage to it. What would we anticipate a survey would cost, more or less? Do we?
For thousands of, I mean, we're talking about thousands of dollars. If you have to, if somebody is acquiring a shore road allowance on their shoreline property, that's, average size shoreline property, it's $6,000-7,000 for a survey. And if we're talking about a bigger area, we're talking about, as much as $10,000 or $12,000, I would think. And never mind when it's going to get done. Because I know that people have been waiting to, I've heard instances of people trying to get survey work done and the demand is so great that it takes months, if not like, us at this point in time, having to wait till next year to have it done. Any more thoughts about the survey? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to know costs and I am very alarmed at surveys, potentially happening at many other locations. I do think this one, given the area and the size of the area, is a bit more problematic compared to other places, but I'm sure it's also out there, and I'm very concerned about, the potential future of our township basically acting as um, campsite providers throughout Algonquin Highlands Groundland. Um,
Crown land.
Yeah, in getting land use permits and operating them in just an attempt to clean up people's garbage. And that's terrible. Crown land, and the reason that Crown land exists and allows for camping is freedom of movement on that Crown land. Is supposed to be public use. Clean up after yourselves. Shouldn't be so hard. So it's a social issue, really, but it's one we've got to push with M&R. We've got to push with the province to do something, because they're giving us no money to do it.
So the question right now is survey at Crown Lake or no?
I want to see the costs, really, but I'm not really a big fan of it right now.
At this point in time?
No.
Okay, well, from what I'm hearing, agreement that, that we look at drafting some correspondence to go directly to M&R, and a correspondence that would go to all of the municipalities. And with a plan of standing up at the bear pit. I mean, I'm not sure that you've all experienced the bear pit. It's when almost all ministers are present, at a big long table. Everyone that's at the conference is in the room, and people get up at the microphone and raise issues that are being experienced by, it can't be just about you. It's got to be about all, different municipalities that have the same issue. And I think that might be more effective than just I don't want to say just a delegation, but I just have seen absolutely no positive reaction or progress from any delegation I've ever been at. And I've been at a lot. It says a lot about our province. My apologies to anybody who takes offense at that. So agreed that we would move forward with that. Any other comments for now? Okay. Well, having just spoken quite a bit about environmental concerns, the next item on the agenda is environmental business. Good morning, Ms. Murray.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
So any highlights that you would like to bring to us on your environmental report?
Just two. One, I apologize. I can't remember how much we spoke about it at the last meeting, but we did have a proposal presented to municipal members about the management of what's called non-eligible source materials, part of the Blue Box program for small businesses. So the province had asked Circular Materials to put together a proposal. So we did hear a presentation of their ideas. Unfortunately, there were some key details missing, and that's why I haven't brought it to council as a report yet. Costing being a key one. There would be a cost for it to the municipalities if Circular Materials did manage materials for small businesses. And the other is what the definition of small businesses were. Those were the two key ones, at least from my perspective, that were missing. I have asked Circular Materials when we might expect to have more information to fill in some of those. And unfortunately, they have not given me, other than they're just not ready to speak about them yet. So that's in the works, and hopefully it hopefully will my hope is that it will be an option that we can consider for those materials and to be making a decision about that. So on the agenda for future meeting. The other, I just wanted to, we did have the Household Hazardous Waste event at Dorset and Oxtongue on August 16th. I would say the attendance was was a little less than anticipated, but it's always difficult. It was a beautiful, beautiful hot summer day, and I can imagine most people would have rather been anywhere else. I'm sure most of the people who were at the event would have rather been doing other things. So that may have accounted for the less, the split, having the event in Dorset and then moving over to Oxtongue. It did work well. It didn't have a huge attendance as well, but
How many attendants were there in Oxtongue?
as we just had 15. So not our sort of typical for an Oxtongue event was in 25 to 30. So less than that.
But we'd have to take into consideration that there was less time involved as well.
Yes, and I wouldn't say that even the 2 hours that we were there, certainly weren't fully utilized. You know, there were you know, there's some people at the beginning, but probably by about 3 o'clock, you know, there were maybe 5 people. So it you know, was sort of a condensed.
Versus how many people that turned out in Dorset?
So Dorset, we had 55. So combined, the number for Dorset and Oxtongue together was more typical for what a Dorset event would be. So no, you know, hazardous waste and management, you know, will come forward at a later meeting. And
Okay.
you know, we can look at that. I don't know if the split event, it was great that it worked out for this. I'm not sure that that's an option that we can always, you know, to guarantee. That depends on the service provider and that sort of thing. It was a bit of an exception. That
It
we-
depends on whether we want to do it or not, too.
And that is absolutely. So I just thought I had those numbers and just to bring those to council's attention.
I just wanted to mention, you've heard the conversation, you've seen some of the concerns that have been raised about disposal of waste from, you know, from Crown Land sites and, you know, just local people trying to help. I know that there's some challenges associated with that, you know, and with the regulations we've got in place for landfill. But, you know, I would ask that you kind of percolate that in your mind and see if, you know, if there's anything that you can come up with that might help in that regard. I know that I don't have a lot of hope that there's much we could do, but just something for you to think about going forward. Any questions for Melissa on the environmental report? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the report? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Short Reed. I should ask, do we need a resolution on that, what we've, or is it just direction to staff on the last discussion we had on Crown Lake?
Just directions.
Okay, we're good. Thank you. Just go ahead.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, Council receives environmental report EB 1625 regarding monthly activities for the month of August for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is fire services. Good morning, Acting Chief.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Any highlights that you'd like to bring to us on your report?
Yes, just a couple of highlights for this go around here. Actually, at the time of this report, we had 992 people following our department on Facebook, and I checked just recently, and we've gained 2 followers since then. So it's nice to see that that's still moving forward and people are looking at our posts.
Right on.
Our recruit program has finally wrapped up, with hazmat being the last co-requisite. All I have to do now is their final exams, and then we'll have another batch of certified firefighters in the county. So that's exciting. Our technical rescue team has recently completed swiftwater rescue training. And there's a nice little video on our social media that highlights that training. Those are the main two highlights that I'd like to bring forward.
Any questions? Deputy Mayor Richards, sorry, Councillor Richards.
Thanks for that. I am concerned, and maybe you can help me with the science behind when we impose a fire ban. We have extremely low water levels. We're seeing sections of forest that are obviously gone dormant because of a lack of rainfall or lakes, etc. I'm hearing of wells drying up. There was a fire yesterday on in my lovely neighborhood. So I'm concerned in the fact that we
What
don't
type of
have a,
fire? You're talking about a brush fire?
yeah.
Okay.
It had been initiated, somebody had a fire. Did their best to put it out, thought it was out, but it was a root fire that several days later popped through. So the concern I'm having is that we don't have a fire ban right now, and I'm wondering why.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. The fire ban is put in place after review of the indices put out by MNRF. So MNRF once a day will put out a whole bunch of numbers that indicate moisture codes and drought codes and fine fuel codes. And all of those numbers put in an algorithm give you an overall rating. And through consultation with the other fire chiefs in the county, that's how the decision is made using those numbers. And currently I haven't checked today's numbers. Actually, they don't come out until 1 o'clock. But the numbers don't support a fire ban at this time, which could change quickly. Could change. I did check the weather. It looks like Monday we might get a little rain. But if the indices from MNRF call for a fire ban, then I think the fire chiefs will come together and discuss that and do what's appropriate.
Thank you. The one comment that I would make is that in situations like that, I would urge whoever is involved in a circumstance like that, call the fire department. We are well equipped. We've paid a lot of taxpayers' dollars to ensure that we've got a boat that will carry a numerous number of firefighters. We've got, equipment that's mobile that can be used, and although efforts made by locals to put the fire out are much appreciated, the path to follow is to call the fire department. That's what they're there for, and to just absolutely ensure that the fire really and truly is out. It's kind of shocking to hear that there's a fire and that nobody thought to call the fire department.
Thank you.
Any questions on the monthly report or for our deputy chief? Hearing none, can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Deputy Mayor Dayu and Councillor Richards.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that Council receives Fire Services Report FD 1125 regarding monthly activities for the month of August for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good day.
To the airport minutes. Skipped over.
Oh. One thing that I failed to deal with were the airport committee update and the minutes of September the 4th. So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive those minutes? Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved, Council receives the September 4th, 2025 Airport Committee meeting minutes for information.
All in favor? And I will say that the committee is working diligently to have towards having a successful fall fly-in. I think we can all pray for rain now and not later. There's a lot of good work being done, and I'm really looking forward to a successful event. And you can see from the minutes that you receive, we're meeting weekly right now, which is, has its challenges, but also shows the commitment of the committee. Okay, so nothing under finance, and next up is our branding strategy.
Good
And a lot of
morning.
good work done by yourself and by the members of the
Yeah,
subcommittee.
thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks very much. Before council is a branding strategy for the township. we did this differently. We brought this in-house. We did not spend money on the services of a consultant in the completion of this project. I would like to thank the members of the working group for the work that we did over the last number of months. And I'm not sure how council wants to proceed exactly. If you wanted to go through the document or if you just want to go straight to some questions or what the preference is there.
Well, I think that, you know, as you said, and we both said, a lot of work has been done on preparing the strategy. Everybody has had it for a period of time. So unless council wants to approach it differently, I think I would just look for comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, you know, from council.
Sure.
Going forward. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Yeah, great work, reasonable, clear, rational, lovely stuff. A couple of questions. In the examples that you've given
Yes.
about the application of
Yep.
the logo, you've shown us some other really great things, like different your colors used, but in different ways.
Yes.
There's one with, you know, triangles, very bold look.
Yes.
There's one with some arrows at the bottom, big circles,
Mhm.
really nice stuff.
Mhm.
Do you foresee expanding the branding strategy to touch on some of those visual elements and give guidelines to those visual elements?
We can include that if you would like to, as technically part of the document. I'd included it as examples of what can be done, because that's the idea, right? Theme and variation, right? And using those elements in different ways. We could kind of add it as a sort of a toolkit kind of page to the document to give a little bit more guidance that way. I think that would be appropriate.
Go ahead. I just kind of want to see if everybody agrees with that
Mhm.
or not.
First, I want to say the committee did an amazing job, probably better than a contract out. But I think anything in to help, so there's no questions, the more in there will solve any issues of somebody saying, what if?
Okay, so I'm taking that as concurrence. Okay. Comments?
I think, you know, as Chad mentioned, it's about the colors and the variations of them being consistent and maintained. And that's what I look for in branding. I'm not an artist. Okay. Consistency is key with me. And I think that's great. Guidelines are good too. But I think less on that, more on just keeping it consistent with colors and formats and fonts, etc., is what's important, and it gives individuals, departments, etc., some latitude to be creative, and that's great.
Okay, you had additional comments?
Yeah, I guess the similar question as to how long is a piece of string? You know, it's one of those things where you could give guidelines to the, you know, do you put 2 spaces after a period or 1 space after a period? Branding can go on for, you know, a considerable amount of time. So I guess that was my question, is whether the group had felt very comfortable that this is where we should limit it and everyone should have creative license from here, or whether there would be a second phase in that. And you know, within that question, I would also add, there are other components that some agencies consider to be parts of branding strategy, like the sort of tone of voice that is to be used in websites or in communications that sets the identity, all that public facing visual and personality of the township can be incorporated into a branding strategy, and sometimes it isn't incorporated, and it stays really limited. So I wonder where the committee landed on that, whether this is the beginning or whether we're sticking with this and then creativity has its way from here on.
I guess it would be fair to say that we were satisfied with the work that we had done, and this would be our branding strategy going forward. You know, whether there needs to be more information added, like, you know, more detail about use, I think it's pretty clear. You know, I don't know about artistic license. Like, this is it. We didn't talk about further stages. I mean, we did talk about our identity, our story, which I think might speak to, you know, I'm not quite sure how you put it, but you know, how we put ourselves forward. You know, we didn't, you know, go into that an awful lot. But you know, I would expect certain, you know, when we're promoting ourselves or speaking about our municipality and who and what we are, you know, I would have certain expectations from anyone who's, you know, working within our organization to, you know, be enthusiastic and put us forward in a positive light. Whether we need to say that or not, I don't know. If that's what you're suggesting. I think it is. We didn't, you know, really, other than talking about who and what we are and the pride we have in our community, we didn't really go too much beyond that. And I'm, you know, I'm not sure if, you know, if you've got any comment about that, Chad.
I think that in general, you don't want to become too overly prescriptive. And I mean that visually, and I mean that in terms of language. If you become too prescriptive visually, then things are going to start to look the same. And that's kind of the challenge with branding, right? You want things to be consistent and aesthetically consistent. So people say that's all Algonquin Highlands stuff, but you don't want it to appear too uniform. Same thing with you know, with language and with tone. And some of this document is just formalizing things that we already do. And certainly like the tone that, you know, right now it's me, obviously. I'm the person doing a lot of the writing, and you know, the tone is positive, right? The tone is small town. It's slightly folksy. We say folks. We say, you know, come on, check this out, right? There's an informality to the way that I write, especially on social media, that is colloquial, that is, you know, conversational. And to me, that's just logical. That's
Part of who and what we are.
that's the way that the township should be portrayed. But you know, someone who may come after me may not feel the same way or do the same thing. So I mean, at you know, there may be some benefit in formalizing some of that stuff, but to me, there's a danger in becoming overly prescriptive with these things, because you don't want things to become too uniform or too monotonous. Also with voice, with different social media accounts, for example, like, you know, there's some slight variation there between the way we might write things as well. That's my 2, 4, 6 cents there.
Yeah, we didn't get too much into social media, you know, and you know, how we would put that forward, because I mean, I think that Chad is doing an excellent job, you know, with our social media. I think we're sort of ahead of the, you know, at the head of the pack when it comes to the county. We're the only ones that have a communications coordinator and somebody who does the kind of work that Chad does, and I think we're all proud of that. I haven't heard any concerns raised by that. And, you know, I think this leaves us, you know, it's open enough. I mean, it sets guidelines, but it leaves things open enough for them, there be some flexibility. And there has been, you know, quite a bit of discussion. You know, there were different groups that had certain, you know, logos and strategies in place that have been used for a long time. You know, we were very sensitive to the museums, because they had certain specific ideas and thoughts about what they wanted to do. And there have been certain logos that have been used by recreation and trails, and how we would consolidate that or use that. And how, you know, how each department would be identified. I think that we were all pretty pleased with the product that we ended up with. After the last meeting that we had, the changes were incorporated. It was sent out to the members of the committee and asked, like, okay, do we need to meet again, or should we just bring this directly to council? And I think we're all comfortable with it coming directly to council. Any other comments or thoughts or additions or? Well, I guess I would say I'd be pleased to see a mover and a seconder to receive and implement the branding strategy. Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Counselor Short Reed, second by Counselor Richards. Be it resolved, Council received communications report COM 425 regarding a branding strategy for the Township of Algonquin Highlands, and the council adopts the branding strategy as presented.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you for
Thank
all
you.
of your work on this, for your patience with us
Thank you.
and my fussiness about using words between like tan and beige. and
Tan and
cream.
beige, that was a big debate. Yes. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thanks. Next, under administration, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the draft minute? Actually, first, I guess I should say, is there anything that that's come out of the museum meetings that we need to hear about from council?
I wasn't at this particular meeting with these minutes. Thankfully, our mayor was in attendance. But we've had a meeting since then, so I can speak to it a little bit. The museum is looking for volunteers, both to be on the committee and to help out at the museum, and so a call for that will come shortly. The garden has done really, really well. They credit the irrigation system that Public Works put in as to giving us a bountiful crop this year, along with our new gardener, Jamie, that has been taking care of the gardens very well. Proceeds have been going to local food banks. So that's good. Public Works has recently installed the railings at the museum to the stairway. And we can bring further news on the next set of minutes.
Yeah, I will say from having attended the meeting, you know, I haven't been at a lot of the museum meetings for a while, but and it was kind of a welcome change for me. But they are definitely struggling with volunteers and committee members, and you know what they're looking for in committee members. And of course, we all know that's an ongoing concern, getting volunteers to join groups and in particular committees. So they're trying to sort of balance out between we need volunteers for certain things and we need committee members for certain things, and you know where the line was for that. I think that, you know, they've got some challenges coming forward. I did want to add to, you know, talking about the you know, the garden, just to let everyone know that there was a little bit of extra marmalade that did not get sold, and it's going to be available for sale at the fly-in, with proceeds coming back to the museum. Madam CIO?
Just a question around the putting an ad out for volunteers, assuming that will come to staff for.
Yeah,
Bill
yes,
to-
yeah, well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So mover and a seconder, you had a question?
I did, yeah. I just saw that there was a request that committee asked council to update the wooden plaques in council chambers to include members of council up to the present day. And I didn't know if that had to be addressed here because it was a request to council.
I think that there was a bit of a question of whether that was actually the role of the Stanhope Museum Committee to make that recommendation, but it is something that, I mean, has been noted and is up to staff to act on accordingly. So mover and a seconder to receive the minutes. Councillors Short Reed and Richards.
Moved by Counselor Short Reed, second by Counselor Richards. Be it resolved, council receives the August 18th, 2025 Stanhope Museum Committee meeting minutes for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is planning. Hello again. First report is a closing of a Shore Road allowance on Cushog Lake by Mitchell and Terrence.
Thank you. Yes, this is an application to close the shore road allowance in front of two properties on Cushog Lake. I did pull this from the consent agenda just for council's information. As the property or this application was received as a result of building without a permit. So just so council's aware of that, they are now in the process of completing the purchase of the shore road allowance, and likely a minor variance will be required once that process has been completed. And that was just for one of the properties where this action was taking place. The other property, they applied concurrently with this particular property. So there's only one offending property.
I was a little bit confused about the names, Mitchell and Terrence. It looked to me like Terrence was the first name. And both were actually Mitchell, but I'm sorry, I just was trying to get back to that and
My understanding, it's a family that owns both properties, so there may be
they're two different surnames. It looked to me like Terrence was a given name as opposed to a surname, but I did want to ask as well on that one, the status of the sleeping cabin.
Sorry, I was just looking at the applications for the names there. Yeah, the sleeping cabin will be investigated further once the shore road allowance has been purchased, but from a preliminary investigation, it appears it does not comply with the zoning bylaws. So they will need to either apply for a minor variance or move the structure so it does comply. So staff are aware of that and will be working towards compliance on that matter.
Okay, any other questions? Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Just for clarification on the GIS document, the surname and given names are clearly listed there, and
Okay.
yeah, limited confusion. Mitchell is the last name for both properties.
Mitchell is the last name for both.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So it should be Mitchell and Mitchell as opposed to Mitchell and Terrence.
That is correct.
Okay, mover and a seconder to approve in principle the application. Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Short-Reed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Short-Reed. Be it resolved, Council receives report PL 9725 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of Lot 2, Concession 8, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Mitchell and Mitchell, Cushog Lake, and that Council approves in principle application OSRA 1425 and OSRA 1525 made to stop up, close, and convey the said shoreline road allowances, and that the applicants are requested to proceed in accordance with the shoreline road allowance closing procedure.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is a proposed right-of-way by Hamilton on Halls Lake.
Thank you. Yes, this is to establish a right-of-way to a recently created parcel of land, a parcel of land that was subject to a previous consent application, which was in 2023. A portion of the property's now been sold to an adjacent property owner. So no new lots being created. This is merely to ensure that the right-of-way access remains for this parcel of land. So it's a fairly straightforward application from staff's review of it. So staff are supportive and recommend council approve it in principle.
Questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to move forward with the application? Councillor Short-Reed, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved, Council receives planning report PL 9825 regarding proposed severance of lands located on part of Lot 11, Concession 7, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Hamilton, Halls Lake, submitted by Hamilton, and further that Council supports in principle the proposed severance subject to the following conditions. 1, payment of taxes, including penalty and interest, and 2, a copy of the draft reference plan be submitted to the planner of the Township of Algonquin Highlands for review and comment prior to the registration of the plan.
All in favor? That's carried. And lastly, under planning is the minutes of the Committee of Adjustment from September the 5th. I did have one question about that, and it was, I would say to council that it was another bit of a barn burner of a Committee of Adjustment meeting with a lot of people in attendance, which is kind of always great to see. The boathouse, the foundation of the boathouse is going down to the base of the lake, or the I just wondered if there was any federal jurisdiction associated with this or approvals, given that, that they've got pilings going down to the lake bottom.
No, so it doesn't cross the threshold of requiring M&R approval. That's generally a very large structure that would require it. It's the actual portion of the foundation that's in contact with the lake bed and not just the bird's eye view of it. So with steel piles, it would never cross that. With large cribs, perhaps you may, but steel piles, it'd be challenging to cross that.
Okay. If there are no other questions, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the minutes? Councillors Shortreed and Richards.
Moved by Counselor Shortreed, second by Counselor Richards. Be it resolved, Council receives September 5th, 2025 Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So external board meetings. Anything on the Dorset Partnership and or Health Hub?
The partnership has one in the works. I haven't gotten a date yet. The hubs, the nurse practitioner is still on maternity leave, so that's just, they're getting by day, and that's it right now.
Okay. Anything on Upper Trent Water Management? That's you?
That is me. I unfortunately was unable to attend the last meeting. I had a schedule conflict. But they do have an upcoming summit meeting on October 3rd. If anyone is interested in attending in Muskoka.
So were you hoping to be able to attend, or is there a conflict on that date?
Yeah, I have a conflict for that date, although I would have very much liked to go.
I'm sorry?
I would have very much liked to go, but it is a conflict for me that day. And of course, Upwump has not met. There is discussion that they may try to do some kind of meeting, but I'm waiting to hear back.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you've basically covered that. There hasn't been, or there is an upcoming meeting of OPP, so really no further updates except that I did raise at the last meeting that we had been having discussions about establishing clearer rules and policies about communications when there are issues going on. And even though that hasn't actually been done yet, there have been improved communications on, if there's items of concern that the detachment commander has sent out notification to the mayors, which is, it's an improvement. We're moving forward. There's still lots of work to do on setting policy with that group, but I'll have a better update for you after our next meeting. Anything from the library?
Yeah, there has been very good use of the Dorset Library branch, which is great. And at the request of the library board, library staff put out a survey to the good folk of Dorset to say, okay, we've not been open for a few years. We are now. These are the hours that we have been open the last number of months. Do they work for you? Do they not work for you? Do you want more? Do you want weekends? Do you want evenings? How, like, let's refine now that we've got the ball bouncing, so to speak. And they got some very good responses, quite a lot of out of towners, cottagers, as well as local folk. And overall, there is a call for more evening and or weekend opening hours, which is feasible so long as it fits within the opening hours, of course, of the Dorset Rec Center. That's, the first criteria on the list. So staff are going to go back and they're going to disaggregate the survey results a little bit more to see, how many folk said they wanted weekend versus how many folks said they wanted evenings, that sort of thing, just to nail down the numbers a little bit. And they're going to come back with recommendations. But on the whole, the library board supports adding hours to the Dorset branch in order to accommodate extra needs in the village of Dorset. So
Well,
details to come.
That's good. I mean, that's great for Dorset. I would assume that that would be, you know, there'd be further discussion, you know, with amongst the library board about how that impacts, you know, kind of the hours overall and the cost of hours overall and how that's balanced out across the county.
Yeah, absolutely. So to increase by 4 hours a week, the overall annual impact on budget would be about $6,000. And in order to increase 4 hours a week at Dorset, it would mean that the Algonquin Highlands branches together, Stanhope and Dorset, would reach half the number of hours that are offered in the other townships. So we are smaller, granted, but this would bring us up to half the number of hours that other townships have. So it's inching its way towards a more equitable arrangement.
Well, I'm glad to see that. I would just hope that, I mean, because I do think that we need to be treated equally, but I also need to, I would like some assurances that they would look at balancing things across, not just, you know, to our benefit, but, you know, rather than just bumping up the number of hours and increasing costs for the library, that they look at the hours. And I mean, that there was a huge move to improving the number of hours in, for instance, in Highlands East, who have 4 branches, that I would look to see some balancing there.
Indeed, that is a conversation that the board has accepted must be had in this coming year. So
Another one of those fun times. It's a tough discussion.
it is a tough discussion, but it's on the agenda.
Great. Community safety and well-being.
Yeah, more interesting and good news there. We had a meeting just in the last couple of days, and the big item ahead is that the community safety and well-being coordinator is going to be gathering data from a variety of sources to bring back a catalog of emergency phone numbers and locations for all types of social well-being and security services across the county. So all of the warming centers and the cooling centers, the phone numbers for addiction response, the phone numbers for support to find emergency shelter, all of those sorts of 211 sorts of services would be compiled into a Halliburton specific directory, which would be available in print, and some copies, a limited run of some copies would be made available, possibly for those who request it within the constituents, but then sort of a desk version for agencies. Should people come into the library, for example, looking for a hotline that they would require, the library staff would be able to pick it up and give it to them right there. And then ideally, everything would be interactively available online as well. So it's, yeah, it's good news.
Great.
And
Anything on Muskoka River Watershed Communications Committee?
nothing really until the winter months is my guess.
Okay. As to county council, the last meeting that we had at county council was relatively short. There was a discussion about, or a progress report given on where we're at with the strategic plan that is being done by staff at the county. And, you know, there have been some delays given staff shortages and the fact that the work is being done by staff, and it's normally that's a you know, a consultant is hired to do that project, but they are moving right along. I could see initially, you know, I thought this is asking too much of staff to do this, you know, over and above their normal jobs, and particularly when there are some shortages in several departments. You know, for instance, it's basically the 2 key people that are looking at the strategic plan are the community safety and well-being coordinator. It's not her role to do that, and the director of planning. And it was a concern to me, but having heard the report that they gave, I think that they're really getting good results, and there are, it seems that there are some benefits to doing it on an in-house basis as opposed to using a consultant. So yeah, they're actually going to be giving us a much more detailed report on where things are at our next meeting. So I look forward to hearing the results of that. The other thing that was, we did finalize agreements with two new doctors and a nurse practitioner, which is really good news. Although it is a little bit frustrating to see that despite the excellent and hard work that's done by our recruitment lady, we're just keeping up with the numbers and not really moving forward at all, which is challenging. And it's interesting or difficult to see that the new doctors coming in aren't necessarily taking on the same number of patients that who they're replacing did cover. So there's still some shortages. But anyway, I mean, she is doing a great job, and we're getting some real success through the work that she's done. And I think that was about all. I think I did speak about at the last meeting that we had about the decision that was made about the county buildings and what work would be done there. So that's it for that. Okay, next under general business is correspondence from the Legion, asking whether we would support doing advertising in their annual military service recognition book. See, the advertising is fairly expensive. Anyway, thoughts on that? I did ask for staff to do a little snoop around to see what other municipalities in the county are doing, and they have done some advertising in this publication in the past, not necessarily now. But anyway, thoughts on whether we should contribute to that or not? We have to make a decision, people. I need your thoughts. Go ahead.
I'm gonna say it's more of a donation than really advertising, because we're not advertising to sell anything, so are we gonna donate to the Legion?
We don't do donations. We have a specific policy about donations, and we don't do donations. I mean, we could call, we can call it advertising, and we do have a specific budget for advertising, but I mean, it's normally for those things that are legislated and advertising is required. So it's like a kind of a yes or no, as Lisa Berry would say, yes or no. Councillor Richards?
I'm wondering if it would be worth the museum advertising in their book about visiting their museum, Dorset or Stanhope.
That's something that would have to be taken to the museum committee to see if they're interested in
How
doing it.
long do we have to respond to this?
That's a good question. Madam CAO,
Their book comes out in October.
so we don't have time. I mean, it's an interesting thought, but I don't think that we've got time to do that, or whether they've got the budgeted money for it either. I did, Madam CAO, you have some thoughts?
This would be new for Algonquin Highlands. This is not something we have done before.
You know, I have mixed feelings about this because, you know, I really feel strongly about making sure that our veterans are recognized and that, you know, what they've done, you know, on our behalf is recognized. But you know, I'm not quite sure whether it's suitable expense for us. I was just trying to, you know, go back and see what the rates were, and they're very high. 400 at a minimum, up to 3,000. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
At the risk of sounding callous, I do look at the examples of the advertisements at the bottom of the document, and they are not advertisements, they are donations. This is a request for donations. And we have a donation policy, which is very clear. We don't. And I really like the idea of the museums, but in absence of that, we don't have anything that we are seeking to advertise right now. I think if we had something that we wanted to get out there, we could call that an advertisement, but we don't at the minute. So I would say maybe putting it in the hands of the museum committees to consider for next year, if it wouldn't be for this year. But I look at what the examples are, and I am seeing donations.
Well, and the other comment to that is that the museum committee comes under the auspices of our donation policy. Now whether they can, is that the comment that you were going to make, or go ahead?
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt in any way.
All right.
I think that we have opportunity through our communications coordinator to honor our veterans that way rather than paying to be in a book.
Good point. So could we respond to them and just outline that that we do have a donations policy that precludes us from doing that? However, we will ensure that, you know, through social media that we do honor our veterans. Councillor Richards?
I'd just like to add to that, that they may contact the museum committees for the future. Because I do think that they do look for places to advertise the museum, and it may be of interest to them.
But, you know, as Deputy Mayor Dayu has said, that they're really not advertising in the normal sense of the word. I mean, they're just saying, you know.
I agree. I think it is a bit of a loophole to ask council to advertise. But I do think it is a good opportunity and place
Good
that's
link.
appropriate for our museums to advertise.
Good point. So what do we have for a resolution?
Be it resolved, council receives correspondence from John Richards, advertising representative from Royal Canadian Legion Ontario Command, regarding advertising in the 13th Annual Military Service Recognition Book for information.
Okay. Mover and a seconder. Do we want to include anything about honoring them through social media, or do you think there needs to be anything added to the resolution? Anybody? Okay. All in favor? It's carried. Did I get a mover and a seconder?
The seconder.
Mover and a seconder? Councillor Short Reed and Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu.
All in favor? Therein lies the challenge of having some resolutions read out and some being more automatic. Are there any notices of motion? Hearing none, was there any support for any of the correspondence?
No.
Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the correspondence listing? Councillors Richards and Short Reed.
Moved by Councillor Richards, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, council receives the September 18th, 2025 correspondence listing for information.
All in favor? It's carried. No closed session, no bylaws, except the confirmatory bylaw. So a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Short Reed and Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved, the bylaw 2025-82 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council, be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal of thanks.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Short Reed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, the September 18th, 2025 meeting is hereby adjourned at 12:15 p.m.
All in favor?